What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Sunday, March 13th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 5-game slate tonight. So let's take a look at the point guard position. Even though he was a flop in his last game, only scoring 30 fantasy points in 28 minutes versus his old team, the Brooklyn Nets. What a disappointing performance. I think he does bounce back and have a great game here tonight. So I like James Harden from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Orlando Magic, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Also eligible at give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Also eligible at the shooting guard position. James Harden has averaged 51.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 37 minutes per game with a 29% usage rate. He's projected at 50 fantasy points here tonight. Now, that would be 5 times value on FanDuel because he's 10,000 FanDuel salary. He is 11,000 DraftKings salary, so he would need 55 fantasy points on DraftKings to get 5 times value, which I think he can do. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 223.5 points scored in this game. So James Harden has scored 30 and 48 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 28 and 38 minutes. Just didn't play enough minutes last game to get it going, but he's got a pretty good track record here versus the Orlando Magic. Scored 71 and 52 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Magic. So if you're looking for a stud that can get 60 plus fantasy points here tonight, I like James Harden here versus the Orlando Magic. Okay, now a stud that I think I like even more than James Harden, especially on DraftKings, I would probably play James Harden on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, I would play Trey Young from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Indiana Pacers, who have the 11th worst defense overall. They give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Trey Young has averaged 49.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 35% usage rate. He's projected at 50.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's 10,100 DraftKings salary, 200 less on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 236.5 points scored in this game. So I think this is a good game to stack. And Trey Young has scored 52, 53, and 37 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 37, 36, and 38 minutes. And he's got a great track record here versus the Pacers. Scored 56, 63, 53, 63, and 37 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Pacers. So 4 of those 5 games, it was 5 times value or more with that 60 plus fantasy point upside. So I like Trey Young here versus the Indiana Pacers. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and we'll send you $25 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. From that same game and that same team, I think this guy's a steal as a value play on DraftKings, and I even like his FanDuel price. I like Kevin Huerter from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Indiana Pacers, who have the 11th worst defense overall, give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Kevin Huerter has averaged 22.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He's projected at 22.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's only $4,600 DraftKings salary, $400 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 236.5 points scored in this game, so I think this is a good way to get some low salary exposure to this high scoring game. And Kevin Huerter has scored 33 and 26 fantasy points in the last two games, playing 36 and 25 minutes. And he scored 25, 29, 27, 46, and 37 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Pacers. So he would have been well over 5 times value, 5 out of his last 5 versus the Pacers. So I like Kevin Huerter here versus the Indiana Pacers. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I got a value play for you here, especially on DraftKings. Maybe only on DraftKings. I'd probably only play him on DraftKings. But I like Austin Reeves from the LA Lakers playing the Phoenix Suns, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing small forwards, but Austin Reeves, he scored 24, 30, and 21 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 31, 33, and 27 minutes. Now, he's only averaging 22 minutes per game on the season, so you can see his minutes have gone up quite a bit the past 3 games. So has his production. His price is still super low on DraftKings, only $3,700 DraftKings salary. Now, he is $1,100 more on FanDuel, so DraftKings value play for me. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game. So I like Austin Reeves on DraftKings as a low salary, high risk, high reward value play here versus the Phoenix Suns. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. I like Darius Bazley from the Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Memphis Grizzlies, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. Although they've been pretty good versus opposing power forwards, Darius Bazley has averaged 23.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 28 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He's projected at 24.2 fantasy points here tonight. I think he can score 27 fantasy points or more, get you 5 times value or more. He's $5,200 DraftKings salary, $200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 230 points scored in this game, and Darius Bazley has scored 27, 18, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 21, and 35 minutes. He scored 27, 7, and 31 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Grizzlies. This guy's kind of hit or miss. You know, if he gets going, he can get 28 to 35 plus fantasy points. But if he's not playing well, I mean, this is like most players, but especially Darius Bazley, a little bit more volatile than normal. But I think he's in a good spot here tonight. Only needs about 26 fantasy points to get you 5 times value or more here in this high-scoring game. So I like Darius Bazley here versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, if you want to save some salary, and let's say you don't want to play Kevin Huerter, but you want to get some low-salary exposure to this high-scoring Atlanta Hawks-Indiana Pacers game, take a look at Danilo Gallinari from the Atlanta Hawks. And Danilo Gallinari has averaged 20.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 24 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He's projected at 22.3 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's only $4,500 DraftKings salary. He's $600 more on FanDuel, and he scored 27, 30, and 20 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 29, 35, and 21 minutes. So I like Danilo Gallinari, who scored 26, 22, 37, and 32 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Pacers. So I like Danilo Gallinari as a value play on DraftKings here versus the Indiana Pacers. Another value play, this guy's in a great matchup, and he's been playing pretty well the past couple of games, and he's going to get well over 5 times value even if he just gets his season average in fantasy points. So I like Brandon Clark from the Memphis Grizzlies playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the second worst defense overall. They give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Brandon Clark has averaged 22.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 19 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He's projected at 23.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.5 times value. He's $4,300 DraftKings salary, 100 less on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 230 points scored in this game, and Brandon Clark has scored 32, 21, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 25, 13, and 27 minutes. So I like Brandon Clark, who scored 19, 36, 27, and 31 fantasy points in his last 4 games here versus the Thunder, here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, moving on to the center position. You got Joel Embiid in a good matchup here versus the Orlando Magic. He's $12,000 DraftKings salary, $1,300 less on FanDuel. So he's in a pretty good spot here tonight. He scored 77 fantasy points in his last game versus the Magic, but only 44, 44, and 34 fantasy points in the previous 3. So he had that monster game last game versus the Magic, but outside that, hasn't been great, but he is in a good spot with a good matchup. He's expensive though, so it's like you play Joel Embiid or you play James Harden as your stud looking to get 60 plus fantasy points. Kind of a coin flip there. But if you want to save some salary at the center position, take a look at Jaren Jackson Jr. from the Memphis Grizzlies playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the second worst defense overall, give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing centers, also eligible at the power forward position. Jaren Jackson Jr. has averaged 31.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 28 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. He's projected at 30.2 fantasy points here tonight. He's going to need about 32 fantasy points to get you 5 times value. And he's $6,300 DraftKings salary, 400 more on FanDuel. We see that Vegas thinks there's going to be 230 points scored in this game. And Jaren Jackson Jr. has scored 30, 35, and 15 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 27, 23, and 12 minutes. So I just hope he can get at least 28 minutes. He scored 27 and 43 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Thunder. So if this guy can just get some minutes, he should be in a great spot here tonight. So I like Jaren Jackson Jr. here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.